very brightly colored and it's very loud, and it's fun for a while.
We want to be free to do what we want to
Two
do.
were Muhammad Ali and Sonny Barker, the president of Hell's Angels.
This is 1095.
Ready when you are.
I'm ready. We are go. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well. Yeah, I suppose actually. Well, how's the performance going? I unfortunately didn't have. I was too busy when I got to Chiang Mai last week to pop in. But yeah. How? What are you in like the second week of it or something like that?
This is how community theater works. Unlike big Western productions that run for 30 odd years, we spent 4 months rehearsing for 4 shows.
It's over. Wow. Oh, that was it. I didn't realize. I assumed it was like a 2-month run. I saw some of the stuff on Facebook, and so it was a 4-show experience. Wow. Was it?
It looks like a big production, but 4 months of slogging away, learning lines, learning where to be, learning how to look angry, all for 4 days, and having done this so many times, you have, and I know everyone else does as well. It's bang, you're doing it. 4 days later, it happens so quick. Yep. It's done, and then we suffer withdrawal symptoms. Like, oh, all the people I was hanging out with for months have just fizzled away.
Well, I mean, when you're doing that much, when you're putting that much effort into a performance, and then the performance itself is such a short amount of time. I mean, the journey is more in the rehearsals, I imagine, isn't it? In terms of the enjoyment and the process and the community that goes around those rehearsals and catching up afterwards. And yeah, I imagine that's more of the memory than the actual performance itself, possibly.
And all those bazillion photographs we take of each other for memory.
Cool. Well, look,
I was a bit naughty with this one because I sort of liked the uniform look, so I grabbed the uniform and kept it.
Oh, did you? You nicked it from the wardrobe, from the stage wardrobe.
They are never going to use the U.S. Naval uniform again unless they do this production maybe in 15 years, and probably someone else in a different size than I am is going to play my part. So the jackets were tailored with military buttons, and we were in charge of decorating them up with medals and insignias and stuff. And I kept mine to a minimum to be balanced out with the rest of the cast. Now I've got it home. All I have to do is pop down to one of those Thai military shops and go crazy. And I walk around Taipei Gate like a U.S. naval officer.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad it was a success, if a short success. But look, you're in Chiang Mai, just for the audience. Obviously, I'm in Pai. Yeah. You're not. We kind of only met recently, but we've crossed over paths with, I think, lots of different connections. But you're not originally from Thailand, and your career, you started off in London, right? In terms of the Andrew Lloyd Webber circles and stage and theatre, and maybe give us a bit of an overview. It'll be interesting.
A brief history of my life.
Exactly.
I'm 5th generation Sri Lankan, which means ethnically Sri Lankan by descent, and Tamil, Sri Lankan, as there's Sinhalese and Tamils. Never been to the country, but grew up in Malaysia in a very British environment because my dad was in the military, and we traveled a lot within Malaysia. I was born in Kuala Lumpur, grew up in Borneo, which was very English, and then came back to the southern part of West Malaysia next to Singapore and did my education there, because the language, the medium of education in Singapore is English. And after that, made my way to the UK to study law. And there was a internal desire to be part of performing art. So my interest was always been in the theater. And in Asia, and Asian parents will always say, there's no future in that. You're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer. And I'm like, I want to be something else. So I sort of had my secret theater life while I was studying. And in the late 80s, I just put pen to paper, wrote 10 letters to the top 10 selling shows in London. Within 24 hours, I was hired by the really useful theatre group, which is Andrew Lloyd Webber's theatre group, that owned the Palace Theatre on Shaftesbury Avenue, which was housing not his show, but Les Miserables. And started off tearing tickets, moved up to the cloakroom, and by the time I finished working the theater, I was basically running catering and in charge of the stocking the bars and making sure there was enough sandwiches and coffee for all the people that came in to see shows. And worked on quite a number of different shows, albeit the same theater company, which was the really useful theater group, which was Lloyd Webber's. So I did things like I worked on Cats, Aspects of Love, and a variety of other little musicals. Never really wanted to be a performer as such, but I love the fact that they can tell a story and transport you into a completely different world in 3 hours with lights and sound and stage movements. Um, when you watch a movie or a movie musical, they stop, they start, they move sets, they move locations. It's a given. But to see all that happen without stopping in front of you in 3 hours is magical.
There is something about there is the risk of going wrong, which also adds to the excitement of the creation and the performance, right? The fact that you cannot change, you've just got to deal with it on the spot. I mean, it's very different to a structured production where you're
you make a mistake on a film, you stop and refilm. You make a mistake on stage, there's no saying, let's stop. You go on. I have seen the most horrendous things go wrong on stage in big multi-million productions. And it's amazing how these performers can recover and just not even and blank it out.
And no one notices except the people who are managing the production.
There are some that are so noticeable, like costumes ripping apart, down their bottom, or someone falling off the stage into the orchestra pit, which happens. And then you have all this minute, forgetting of a line, or forgetting to come in, or forgetting to leave, or forgetting to take the appropriate jewelry off when you're meant to be in medieval, or in France in 1850. You can't be wearing glittery diamond rings if you're miserable. So it's funny how the audience never catches those tiny mistakes because they see it once. Whereas when you work in the theater and you see it every day, you see all those little things that happen.
Do you I know we'll talk about it. I know the kind of acting scene in Thailand is relatively small, and you've been in the kind of a lot of the bigger movies that come out here. You've had parts in it, as many of the people that we mutually know have. But
right.
Do you have a preference for the stage versus jumping on a set in terms of a movie? It's obviously very different, but yeah.
They're each and every form of art, and more so when I'm talking about theater as well as visual art, like theater, movies, and so on. They have their pluses and minuses. Now, I am a little bit old school, more of the British line of thought that a good stage actor or a good theater actor is going to make a much better film actor, and not the other way around. In America, a lot of the actors, I believe, are basically film actors. And once they've created a great big name for themselves, they're usually put into a play or a musical to sell tickets. Whereas if you look at all the well-known British film actors, their background is all stage. And it makes them, and there's a distinct difference, and makes them a lot stronger. Definitely easier to do film than it is stage, so it's a great way to go. My interest has always been the stage, but like you said, there's not much of it in Southeast Asia. Now I qualify that because in places like Japan and Korea, it's big, Whereas in Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, even maybe Philippines is not so bad, but otherwise, it's not. Southeast Asians are not. They didn't grow up. It's not part of their culture. It's not. They like their traditional dances. They like their musical stuff, or their ethnic theater, but not what I would call Western theater.
It does really surprise me, actually. Now you're saying it, I hadn't really thought about it, but Singapore, I was in Singapore for 8 years, and the theater is relatively big there. It's a big thing, right from your kind of big West End shows that make it out there down to your kind of more indie style shows. And I went to a number, and I used to know I had a friend who was a playwright. She was able to put a show on, get a pretty good following. And it kind of surprises me that it's not bigger in Thailand, particularly Chiang Mai. So I've been to the Gate Theatre. I went about 3 years ago. I can't remember the production. It was a number of short stories, but it was fun. But it was like, what?
It was almost Maine.
Almost Maine. Okay.
8 little vignettes that were strung together in this the Northern Lights background.
Yeah, that's right.
And we'll come back to that in a minute, because that was my big break into the Gate Theatre. I was executive director.
Okay.
And that was my baby. We'll come back to that in a minute.
So, I mean, for me, I had I really enjoyed it. Fun night, but it did feel like, wow, this is kind of like, you're at school and you've got a place out the back to use. And just the support was so kind of lacking, and there was a pretty good audience, really. But it does surprise me, because Chiang Mai particularly, you'd think there would be a bigger theatre scene and a bigger opportunity around theatre, really.
You would think, considering that at that time, more so than now, the expatriate community here is slightly older and more cultured in a sense, without sounding horrible, and have been exposed to theatre in their home countries, and are craving not only theatre, but things like museums and art galleries, which Chiang Mai is so lacking in. And so, when I was in Bangkok, I was envious, because I heard that Chiang Mai actually did a lot more theatre productions that was more in tune to what you'd find in big cities than Bangkok. There you go.
Yeah, indeed. It is surprising. So, yeah, what about the move? Well, actually, before we do that, you said you'll go back to that. Let's chat about that production. I remember I really remember it as there was a number of short stories, and my memory isn't the best at this age, but
that's all right.
But yeah, enlighten us, remind me of some of it, because
this whole conversation may be slightly disjointed. So we've jumped from we've just all jumped from London right into Chiang Mai. When I got here, I'd already lived in Bangkok for 24 years, and in fact, the scene in Bangkok, which we'll talk about in a bit, was slightly different than it is here in Chiang Mai. And when I was offered a job here, I had panic attacks, because I saw Chiang Mai as a tiny little place with really nothing much to do. My memories of it from being here 20 odd years ago was, it's small, it's provincial, it's going to be miserable. Not for a big city person who's lived in Singapore, London, Bangkok. And yet, within 2 days of arriving here, absolutely loved it. It had changed. It was hip, it was happening. But I also had heard that there was a theater company, which I quickly got involved in. And having some background in community theater in Bangkok, they were thrilled to have me on board, because I was bringing them some fresh ideas. And one of the things that I have tried, and I'm still working with the Gate, is they are safe in their productions, in the sense that the place that they put on appeal to the demographics of the theater goers in Chiang Mai, which is pretty much the older generation, not the 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds. It's more 50, 60, 70. Okay. The Gate's been running for 15 years, and they've got a lot of productions under their belt. And what they tend to do is they rehash old plays again. So, for example, if Driving Miss Daisy did well 6 years ago, why not we do it again? We have the sets, we have the costumes, we know how to do it, and so on. When I joined, I said, look, we need to break the way of thinking a bit. Let's bring in this play that can be broken up into so many little bits, cast. It's sometimes done in different countries with a minimal number of casts playing multiple roles. I said, forget that. We're going to cast every role is going to have one actor, which means 18 or so actors. And to make it simpler for me, instead of directing all 9 vignettes, I will hand off to some other people. That's why I said I was executive director, meaning I directed a few of them and yet oversaw the other people that were directing the minor ones as well. And yes, we had some amazing new fresh blood come into the theater. And whoops, are you there?
Yeah. All good.
No, I'm sorry. So
I'm here. You're here. It's all good. No problem.
So not only did we have some fresh new young blood in the theater, they bring their friends. So if you got a 22-year-old guy who's never been on stage casting this thing, what he's going to do is he's going to tell all his buddies, hey, I'm in this thing. And it's now bringing in new people that didn't know this thing existed. And that was the rationale behind doing Almost Maine. And just for your information, not long from now, I'm going to do another thing where it's in pre-planning, 10 plays by 10 different directors and no more than 10 minutes each. And one of the reasons Almost Maine was a good choice when I did it then, and this 10 plays by 10 directors, 10 minutes each, is people's attention levels now has dropped because of social media, smartphones. People don't watch movies like they used to. They want to see little snippets, and that's it.
That is it. Yeah, I mean, that was going to be one of my questions, actually. It maybe lead into it, but that's a really good idea. 10. So that'll be one product. So that'll be one production.
That's what I'm going to call it.
Couple of hours, 10. I mean, but it does. I mean, even myself, I'm in the tech industry, but I'm closing in on 50. I can do it. I like long form. I can do, movies, but even myself, my attention span is not what it used to be. Now, if you're a 20-something person, you're really plugged into your iPhone. Exactly. Grabbing that attention is a real challenge. Just going back to the talking about that production and did you find that the audience, I don't know if you remember, but did you get younger people coming into the gate then by by doing a production like that?
A reasonable number of new faces in the audience, solely again because of the new faces that we had on stage. But it was obviously not sustainable because it was one little project I did for the gate, and they pre-plan a lot of what they do into the future. And the guy who oversees the gate, Stefan Turner, very pleasant guy, he also has to play it safe. And he's a more dramatic director and likes showing conflicts between actors and so on. I'm a little bit more silly or frivolous. I like fun and comedy and as long as the audience have a good laugh and I always believe in shock value. So if you can shock the audience, they'll love it. And I don't know if you remember the last bit of Almost Maine, the two people on stage start frantically getting undressed to the pounding sound of the heart. And it took a while to get that all coordinated. And the audience are like wondering, when is this going to stop? Because they're going, more and more clothes are coming off. It's scary. And these little things, audiences love being like, what's going to happen next? But when you go and see these plays, like, for example, Driving Miss Daisy or The Cane Mutiny, it's very dialogue heavy.
Yeah.
And it's the audience have to be strong to be able to handle 2 hours of,
and probably older, like you say. I mean, typically, and that, I mean, I don't know how much you can share about this 10 thing, but it's a good idea. It sounds like a good idea, and I imagine you can really leverage a younger audience with that, particularly if you go out to those, directors, and of which you got me thinking about the whole, because of COVID and lockdown. I mean, the short movie space has been really buoyant in Thailand anyway, but it's become more so, I think, because of the lockdown. Have you been involved in, we haven't chatted about it, so I don't know beforehand, but have you been involved in any of those kind of short movies areas or,
No.
projects?
I have not. I've done one short movie that was more of an artistic project for an ex-Chiang Mai resident who went down to Bangkok. So it was a movie, but it wasn't for public viewing or so. But that was fun and easy to do. But yeah, so now I've sort of lost it.
Well, my point was, I suppose I bring it up because it's a really interesting parallel to what you look at with this 10-10-10 project. Because
exactly,
if I was a kind of young, Chiang Mai or Bangkokian director making these short movies, which there seems to be a lot of these festivals, that could potentially be exactly the kind of person you could bring into a project like that and get them to put on their first kind of stage production.
The other thing about getting actors that would do stage productions as well, it does scare a lot of people. The fact that then in front of these 100 pairs of eyes staring down at you, and the possibility of making a complete fool of yourself on stage, where you can't stop and refilm or say, let's do this again. It's just and it scares. It takes a certain a person of certain constitution to be able to stand on stage and say, you know what, I'm going to overcome this and I'm going to do it. And there you go. I've got friends who do films who say there is no way I'm ever going to do anything on stage. And there are people on stage who poo-poo films and saying, films, I will never do that. I'm a stage actor and that's all I'll do.
Sorry, go on. You're going to say something.
And it's like I said, it has its pluses and minuses, but I always feel if you're coming from the stage, you're going to be a much stronger actor in a film.
Now, to that point, my question is, there is, and tell me if I'm wrong, because I'm not an actor, but for me, there does feel a difference in the delivery as well on stage, apart from the fact that you are live and you make a mistake, you've got to carry on. There's also a kind of there's almost an over dramatization of what you're doing versus when you get onto a film set, right? Where it sits back a little in terms of the performance. Is that right?
Exactly. You're spot on there. On stage, there are things that you can get away not concentrating so much on. For example, makeup on stage is not, it's exaggerated if you want to portray something like a mold. It's made bigger than what it would be on your face than it would be in a film because of the distance the audience is to the actor. Okay. And in many community theater productions like what we have in Bangkok and in Chiang Mai, as opposed to big budget theater productions, a lot of them are not mic'd, the actors, which means projection is so important. And with new actors, you find this a lot. The director is always screaming, "I can't hear you. You need to project." And it's really hard. It's a tough thing to do to be able to be heard at the back of the theater without shouting. And it's a trick. There's a fine line between being heard and increasing your voice as opposed to yelling. And then it distorts what you're trying. If you're supposed to be whispering sweet nothings into this woman's ear in a romantic scene, and the audience can't hear it, and you start screaming at her in her ear, it does not look romantic anymore. And then, unlike film, lighting is an issue. The lights are all set up on rigs above where you're meant to be. So you need to know exactly where you have to move to for the light to catch you. And if you're not paying attention or you're off, then you're standing in darkness and you're just a voice. Now in film, they will work around that with you. And the other thing is, in film, continuity is a massive issue because it's filmed over several days or weeks or even months later, as well as when you're filming. A lot of people don't realize this, and I was actually told this by someone, and I've seen it myself. And you will have other film actors here that will verify. When two people are talking in a frame on a film, they're actually unusually closer than what they'd be naturally. Okay, it's because of how the camera is set up to film it, and you're basically, your noses are nearly touching, and yet when it's finally edited and put out, it's slightly different. You may know this as a director. It's some things on film are done unnaturally, and yet the finished products look better that way because it's tweaked.
I would agree, but I wouldn't call me a director, by the way, just for the audience.
Well,
Thanks for the label, but I can't claim to be a
well,
film director. But I appreciate I appreciate.
I'm not much of an actor either. I've just been lucky. I've done stuff, but there you go.
Well, you have. I mean, on that note, I mean, you've kind of. I know, this scene in Thailand. I think I said this before. It's quite incestuous almost. It's quite small, right? There is this kind of group of people that get into pretty much not all, but most of the movies, and you strike me as part of that scene. How did that all happen, and what's some of the kind of work you've done?
I know a woman that is, I worship her. Any movie that has ever been filmed in this country, she's in it. Okay, and you'll be watching just something like I think it's The Impossible, the tsunami movie. She's in that.
Yeah.
No Escape in Chiang Mai. She's in that. Every movie. She was in. She's actually been in all the movies I've been in, but sometimes they cut us out. But and when I first got interested in doing movies, she was who I strived to be, because she had this IMDb page that was packed out, and she lives in Asia. And yet her IMDb page looks like someone that lives in California or Hollywood. And so then, by sheer luck, I was hired by the Warden Pictures, basically as a language consultant for the Mechanic Resurrection, because their prison scene was meant to be in Malaysia, and they needed someone Malaysian to oversee the setup and all the text and writing that was visible. And they called me up and said, "Hey, we found you on expat.com, and we know there are very few Malaysians around," which is not true. There were only about 4 Malaysians on expat.com that they could contact. And they said, "Would you like to come in? Would you like to be part of a movie?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why not?" And I go in there and they look at me and they say, "Oh, you're not Malaysian." I said, "Well, I am by nationality. I think what you mean is I'm not Malay, because ethnically I'm not. Malays are like Thais. They're brown, they're short, and they look like Southern Thais." And I said, "Look, I'm Malaysian. I come from Malaysia. I speak the language, but I'm ethnically Sri Lankan." They said, "Look, we need someone who at least speaks the language." They put me through a screen test and an audition. My Malay is really wonky, by the way, and panic attack. And I didn't know certain words. And then I realized it doesn't matter, because neither do they. I could put in any word I want. They wouldn't know. That's why they were hiring me. So they then offered me a tiny role as a prison warden, in the prison scene, which was my first tipping of my toes into the movie world, and it was phenomenal. And one of the other guys that you had on your podcast, Vitya, okay, was there, and I know him from other people like Don Lind and so on, and he gave me some very important pieces of advice. He said, "Enjoy what you're doing," which I did. He didn't have to tell me that. He said, "Keep your ears open and be civil and nice, because they're watching you." any little silly temper tantrums or, getting prissy and pissed off does not work in the movie world. Even if you're in your hotel room, they have ears everywhere, and like you said, it's incestuous. So if you're screaming and yelling at some waitress in the hotel before you start filming, the production people get to know about it, and it spreads like wildfire to all the other production houses. So the other thing Convitia told me was, whatever they want you to do. And they'd given me a rifle, and I'm not the fittest person. I smoke like a chimney, and I don't exercise. And they made me run about, half a kilometer carrying this gun, not in a straight line, jumping over tables and under chair. It was the most horrendous thing. And I thought, all right, we've done a run through once. It's all set up. They're going to film it. And hopefully a couple of takes and it's done. If I'm not wrong, I think we had to do it about 18 times. And there was not enough time between takes to catch your breath. My heart was about to explode. And he said, until you pass out, do it. And if you physically cannot do it, then that's a different story. But do the best you can, because they will value what the effort you put in. And yes, so after those 18 takes, I think they may have carried me away in a stretcher. And actually in the film, you hardly even see it.
I did try to look. I think I know the clip. Is it on your YouTube channel? I was looking before.
It is.
And I think Vithya was in that. I thought Vithya, didn't he wasn't he a fisherman or something? I can't remember. He was on a fishing boat. Was he?
Vithya, the fisherman, was in Meg with Jason Statham.
Oh, there was like one scene out of Meg that was filmed. That's
yes.
right. Or a couple of scenes filmed. Oh, okay. So no, he was one of the prison wardens, right? Yeah. So behind the bars.
This is a bit of a scandalous little tidbit for your viewers. When I was offered the job by Dewan Pictures, they said, "You'll be prison warden." I'm like, yeah, well, that's cool. Okay, nice little swanky blue Malaysian prison warden uniform and so on. I like being in uniform, as you can tell. And I was driven down to Chanthaburi, all gung-ho to be prison warden. And the casting person said, look, when you reach a hotel, I need you to give me a call. So I did. She said, what I want you to do is use your phone and record the script very slowly in Malay. And me being naive, I thought, you know what, maybe they just want to, edit it in or whatnot, or just check it. Then she said, I want you to also record a second version where she said, I want you to write it phonetically. Like, not in phonetic symbols, but how it should be said accurately in English. And I'm like, this is getting weird. And I did it. Well, if they ask you to do something, you do it. What I found out was they had switched me out of the prison warden position, and now I'm prison guard, because Whittier was now commissioned as prison warden, and he had to learn the lines as he was driving down from Bangkok on his own, and they'd sent him the audio clip. And so I sort of felt slightly, the word wouldn't be cheated, but a little bit miffed. But to be honest, Matthew, it didn't bother me because I was in a film. It's my first film. If they say, Suman, you're not prison warden, you're going to be a guy in the background sweeping the prison, I would have been happy. Okay. So, yes, so I was pretty much prison warden who's now demoted to prison guard. But bless Whittier, he got the big title, but his clips were just, and they cut out a lot of dialogue. And his clips were just as, he
did have the benefit or the advantage of having Ryan Gosling on his CV, I think. So that probably gave him a bit of a shoe in to that role.
Oh, of course. I mean, and he's, he's thick with Tom. And one of the reasons I wanted to do The Mechanic was knowing Tom from his other works like The Last Executioner. I was more interested in hobnobbing with these people and enjoying how a movie is made. because unless you do a movie, there's nobody realizes the amount of work and energy and dedication that goes into a tiny 5 seconds clip.
Yeah, well, we worked when I shot in Bangkok. We shot it's about 6 minutes, but we worked with the Warden, so we didn't. Tom, we just kind of outsourced all his services. You know, we had our own directors and DOPs and stuff, but yeah, just the professionalism of the structure and the delivery and everything else. Yeah, there's so many nuts and bolts that go into and that was tiny. I mean, you're talking Mechanic Resurrection would be, I think, one of the top, I don't know, in the top 5 Hollywood productions that's been here, I would think, at a guess. I don't know, but it's definitely one of the biggest. So,
and considering the pretty much the whole film, except for bits of Croatia, all the Sydney scenes, the Rio scenes, everything, it was all filmed here. The prison scene in Malaysia was filmed here, and apart from doing that little bit of acting, I had to make sure there's a prison logbook as Jason Statham comes into the prison. And I remember David Clark, one of the what would you call him? The on-site director, the one that was directing me, basically. He said, I'm giving you this book. Write down 20 Malay-sounding names, 20 crimes, and just mix it all up. Rape, murder, robbery, robbery, and frantically. And I'm it's not my first. It's not a language I'm familiar with, and yet I want to do a good job. So I was really thinking about it, mixing it all up. Then I get it down quicker. And it's in the film, and all that writing was there, but you can't see it. But and then setting up, like, the fruit stands in Thailand are set up very artistically, where the oranges are arranged in a sort of pyramid. And I went up to them and I said, "That's not how it's done in Malaysia. Malaysians don't care about fruits on a cart. Just bung them on. Get rid of all these fancy designs." So that was part of what I did.
Cool. And that's led to other. Did you end up? Were you involved in The Cave or any of the other productions?
No. And I had a blast. Sort of wanted to do stuff. I was remunerated quite well, considering I didn't have an agent. Then I thought, you know what? This is not my career, but it was enjoyable. And the people I worked with who cast me in The Mechanic work for other production houses, as they do. They're all over the place. And I found whenever they needed me, they'll call me directly and say, "Hey, Suman, would you like to be in this project?" Or, "We need someone to accompany this kid who's filming a commercial in Chiang Mai. Would you want to come up as a translator for him?" Or, "There's this scene that we're filming." So I did All I See Is You, a Blake Lively movie, where I played a patient in a hospital, eye hospital. It was cut out of the movie, but you know what? Yeah, why not? Couple of hours, not couple of hours, 12 hours. You meet some fantastic people waiting around to film. And I also did a Swedish movie called the sequel to The 100-Year-Old Man Who Climbs Out of the Window. And it's called The 101-Year-Old Man Who Skips on His Bill and Disappears. They flew me down to Samui, filmed in an airport, and that had its challenges because every time a plane landed or was about to land, we all had to stop. Couldn't move anywhere. Chain smoker as I am, desperate for a cigarette. No, you can't move. And until the plane cuts its engines, and we start filming again. And then when the plane starts its engines to take off again, it was a nightmare filming in an airport, but all in good fun.
And like you just said, I mean, one of the great things, there's a lot of hanging around when you make movies. There's a lot of waiting in between, but you meet some really great people, particularly here on sets. There's just a real nice culture around the movie set, and it's very multicultural and diverse in terms of the types of people on a movie set in Thailand. So
exactly.
Yeah.
I've made some really good friends. There were about 400 people, extras and featured extras in the Mechanics prison scene. 100 of us were brought in from Bangkok. We all traveled together. We were put in hotels. a lot of us still keep in touch, and we've created such a good bond. Although some of them have moved on to other countries and so on, and we still look back at, fond memories of doing those 6 days in that prison.
Yeah.
Oh, funny, a bit of an anecdote for you. For the local prisoners, they were finding it very hard to cast these extras. What they did was, we were using abandoned prison. Something happened about 10 years ago. It flooded and many prisoners died, and the Canterbury local government sort of disbanded it and let the prisoners go and pardon them. So what the casting people did was, they went around Canterbury and recalled the real prisoners that were in that prison. And these are scary looking, tattooed, dark, scrawny, evil looking men, but with hearts of gold. And they're like, hey, I was in that cell. I was accused of murder, and I had a life sentence. And these guys were showing their cells to us, saying, it's so great to be back here, knowing that I can go home tonight.
I wonder, you remind me of A Prayer Before Dawn. I've always wondered whether the prisoners, I know Vithya was in that, I think, but the prisoners in that prison, if you've seen the movie, that one of the guys who is now a pretty well-renowned actor with the full face tattoo, but right? Yeah, a lot of the guys, the extras in that movie, I wonder if they were just part of the prison. So I'm sure it's a common way, not usually that you go and gather up the guys that used to be there.
Yeah. It's the best. I mean, to use real people as extras is the way to go.
Yeah, for sure.
You get the real, the real heart of that those extras. They know what to do. You get a real actor playing a woman selling noodles. She probably don't know how to make noodles.
Indeed, I couldn't agree more. We're good to get community involved. So what's before we knock off, what's the two things? What's on the track for you? Anything to share? And also, where can people find out more about you and follow you online?
All right. Before we go into that, I'm going to just pepper in one little thing.
Go for it.
This. I've just recently finished doing a series for, I'll call it Paramount / Apple TV, which is Tharan. And you mentioned something, and we talked about how great it is to meet all these people while you're waiting around. And that rings true for all the other films I've done, except for this. And it's a weird reason why. Except for the lead actor who is foreign, and I'm not going to mention names since it hasn't come out yet. Wait and see. All the featured extras, the local cast, as well as the regular extras, were all Indian, of Indian descent or Thai Indians. And maybe there were about 3 or 4 South Indians, such as I would consider myself south of South India, Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
And northern and most of India, people speak Hindi. And when you put a bunch of Hindi speakers together, all they speak is Hindi. So me and my 12 buddies in the rest areas, I would go in after doing a shoot, and we had to wait maybe 2 hours. And I would like to interact and mingle and chew the fat. But these guys were blabbering away in Hindi, and I was just left to my own devices, sitting in the corner of our air-conditioned hut or tent. And they'll come up to me and ask, Suman, are you okay? You look very sad. Do you feel tired? I'm thinking, hell no, nobody's talking to me. That's why. So yes, it's great to meet people in some movies, but in some others, you just, tough luck. But I did make a couple of good friends. Now, having said that, what's up in the future? My logical thinking and my feelers have given me information that this series Shantaram is going to be enormous when it comes out. And the fact that it's going to sell so well, they didn't film more than, say, 20-25% of the book. It's very likely they're going to move on to more seasons, like season 2 and 3 and so on. And lucky for me, my character doesn't die, although I'm just a background character in season 1. It could mean I have a bigger part in the next season. Who knows? But I'm hopeful. Don't know yet.
Well,
Apart from that, I am moving up in the realms of the Gate Theatre. I'm going to have a little bit more control with what we put on, which now allows me to bring in more hip and happening productions. Stefan, the guy, is getting tired. He enjoys designing sets, and I'm the one with all the crazy ideas, and he loves it. Okay. Apart from that, I still get the odd call, Shuman, do you want to be in this movie? Do you want to do that? And I like the fact that I can say no if I want to. And I like the fact that, I don't know what's really happening until it happens.
Awesome. Well, Shuman,
where can people find me?
Yeah,
Last
well,
one.
yeah,
Simple.
well, firstly, before that, I was going to say, just on Chantra, firstly, best of luck with that. I do hope it goes on. I've read the book, so I do look forward to it. There's also, as I've watched the evolution of the production, I know the DOP who's based in Bangkok. And also there's some interesting, I think they shot some of it in Australia, which I assume is in line with the production. So so I look forward to that when it comes out. But anyway, please, Shuman, thanks for joining. But before we knock off, share your social details where people can follow you and find out what you're doing.
I like my parents always wanted me to be that renowned doctor engineer, and I never was. But I can safely say, if you were to type in my name in Google, there are umpteen pages and pages of me. I don't know how that happened. So I'm easily Googleable. But I'm on IMDb. I've got my own YouTube channels with all stuff that I've done, whether it's singing or TV documentaries. Or
give us your name. What does someone Google? If they're listening now, what do they Google?
I say it as Shuman, but it's actually Suman, which is human without the H and an S. And I use my initial C, so it's Suman C, Tharan, and that's Tharan. It's a very unusual name. It sounds half Danish and German, and it does good. And especially when people call me without seeing me, they have no idea where I'm from.
Awesome. Well, it's been lovely to chat. I appreciate you sharing, and hopefully I will see you in Chiang Mai at some point over the Christmas break, and maybe at Why Not again, which I'm often at, which is where we met. So
is that where you're going?
Well, no, but I'm often at Why Not, and we met at Why Not. So
Why not?
Yeah. So
and I will keep you posted. Now you probably wind this down. Let's talk silly things now.
All right. Well, we say goodbye to the audience, and all the best.
Goodbye, audience. Thanks for joining.
To do what we want to do.
Muhammad Ali and Sonny Barger, the president of Hell's Angels.
This is 1095.